Today you're going to be learning about consecutive integer word problems. So there are a couple words here that we should define before we go too much further. Obviously, this tells us we're going to be working on some word problems. Integer. Remember that integer means a positive or negative whole number. So if you think you're going to forget that, or even if you don't think you're going to forget that, let's write that down right now. So as a reminder from our first unit, integer means positive or negative whole number. So in other words, some integers might be -7, +12, 0, 3, -100. Things that are not integers, decimals like 2.1. Fractions like 2/3. All right, the last word that we need to talk about is consecutive. Consecutive means in a row or in order. So when I talk about consecutive integers, I talk about integers that occur in a row. So if I'm talking about consecutive integers starting with 2, I'll talk about 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So let's pick some consecutive integers. Let's say I'm starting with 19. My smallest number is 19, and I'm talking about consecutive integers. I'd be talking about 19, 20, 21, and 22. Remember that my consecutive integers can be positive or negative. So I could also say, if I wanted to talk about a different set of consecutive integers, I could say like -2, -1, 0, and 1. Those would also be 4 consecutive integers. You'll also be asked to talk about consecutive even integers. So obviously these are all even numbers that occur in order. So I could say like 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Those are all consecutive even integers. Let's say I started with -2. The next consecutive even integers would be -2, 0, 2, and 4. We can also talk about consecutive odd integers. So these will work the same way. They'll skip one, just like the even integers, except this time I'll start with an odd number. So if I start with 1, the next consecutive odd integers will be 1, 3, 5, and 7. So as we're working through these consecutive integer word problems, please feel free to refer back to this table because it'll be pretty helpful as you're working through. Let's take a look at number 1. 2 consecutive integers have a sum of 67. What are the 2 integers? So we're not talking about consecutive even or odd integers. We're just talking about 2 numbers in a row, and they add up to 67. We want to know what they are. We're going to write an equation to represent this. Let's start with a tape diagram, though. If this is my first integer, my second integer is going to be the same size as that, except 1 bigger. So let's call this x. That means our second integer is x plus 1. I'll use my tape diagram that I already drew as a guide to defining my variables. So x, this is my smaller number, and x plus 1 is my bigger number, but I'm only using one variable. So I'll say let x equal the smaller integer. Our next step is to write and solve an equation. So looking at our tape diagram, I can see that I'm talking about x and x plus 1. And I can see that all together, they add to 67. And I know that because I was told that in the problem. So when I'm writing and solving an equation, I know that what's inside my tape diagram always has to be equal to what's outside my tape diagram. Inside my tape diagram, I've got x and x plus 1. Outside my tape diagram, I've got 67. I was asked to write and solve this equation. We talked about how to solve more complicated equations yesterday. The only difference between this and equations that you've solved before is that you need to combine like terms on the left-hand side before we can solve. And we've been working on that. We've been simplifying expressions for all of January. So instead of x plus 1, we know that we could take x plus x and instead think of it as 2x plus 1. And that's what's equal to 67. Once I've gotten my equation written out like this, you know how to solve. I'll subtract 1 from both sides. When I do that, I end up with 2x equals 66. And then to finish solving, to undo my 2 times x, I'll divide both sides by 2. And that gives me x equals 33. I didn't answer my question yet. My question was, what are the two integers? I know that x was the smaller number, right? X is 33 and it's the smaller one. And the other one's one bigger. So my two integers should be 33 and 34. When I check my work, I don't have to use a very formal method. I can just go through and check, hey, does that make sense with the problem? So the problem said that these two numbers, when I add them together, they come to 67. So let's see. If I take 33 plus 34, 3 plus 4 is 7, 3 plus 3 is 6. In fact, I do get 67, which means I solved this correctly. Please flip your paper over and start the next video.